If I hear even one more rolling in it, super successful YouTube prepper guy suggests that everybody run out and grab a freeze dryer, I am going to lose my mind. Vegan prepper. Vegan prepper. Hey everyone, Kathy the Vegan Prepper here, bringing you a video all about my love for dehydrating and why I believe it is still such a valid and wonderful choice for your prepping arsenal. And I have to say, my little intro was just kind of funny. I do not begrudge anybody their success. I so look up to and admire the really successful YouTubers among the prepping community who are so great at disseminating, huge amounts of information into really successful and well put together videos. And I so appreciate them, and I'm just kind of poking fun a little bit because it really does seem like lately so many of the videos are about how great freeze drying is. And I have seen several other YouTubers poo-poo dehydrating a little bit. And now I do definitely get that if you are not vegan or whole foods plant-based, it can feel like there's kind of too many rules with dehydrating, or it's not as good or as versatile as freeze drying, which may technically also be true, but I'm going to sort of talk about freeze drying versus dehydrating in this video, and sort of hash out some of why I think dehydration might still be the best choice. Now, freeze-dried foods do definitely retain more nutrients for longer than dehydrated foods, but contrary to popular belief, dehydrated foods also have a ridiculously long shelf life. Some of them have a shelf life of 20 years or more, especially things like your vegetables, your dehydrated grains, dehydrated beans, things like that. Things that have a higher sugar content, like fruits, usually have a shelf life of something more like 5 to 10 years, but then there are even certain exceptions there, like apples. Dehydrated apples will last you a good 20 years. There are some rules around dehydrating which are not really there with the freeze drying. Number one being that you shouldn't be dehydrating anything that has a large fat content. So really it makes it so that if you are whole foods, plant-based, dehydrating is kind of one of the most perfect things that you can do for your food preservation, because you also shouldn't really be dehydrating eggs, and you shouldn't really be dehydrating anything with dairy in it. Those things are things that can't really be dehydrated very safely. There are definitely people who do it, but it's not considered generally safe. So just sort of keep that in mind. So yes, I guess I understand, like I said, why people who are not vegan would see dehydration as not a very good option, because you're not going to get all of your normal foods like your dairy and your eggs and all that. But especially if you're vegan, but even non-vegans, there are so many options, and I just kind of want to cover a little bit about that right now. So yes, dehydration is still absolutely a valid and even amazing choice for your long-term food storage preparation. It is far more versatile than most people give it credit for. There are so many things that you still can dehydrate. It's actually kind of incredible the variety that you can create. If you are not vegan, as much as I do definitely want to help people who are plant-based and who are vegan, but I do understand that there are people who are not vegan who watch my channel, and I absolutely love that. Thank you for being here. You can add in the freeze-dried whatever thing that you feel like you still need. If it's, some dairy product or some egg product, you can go ahead and get that. So you can also use dehydration to drastically reduce your costs in storing up your freeze-dried foods. Everything that is not the unsafe things can be dehydrated, and then the kind of unsafe things that we don't eat anyway, but if you eat it, you can get it freeze-dried. It is a real option for your food storage, especially for almost kind of more of a disaster type situation. You can turn all kinds of things into instant meals. I have covered a lot of dehydration for instant meals on the channel. At the end of this video, the playlist of my dehydrating playlist is going to pop up, but here's just a couple that a few that I can show you. So like here's one that's based in pasta. It's got dehydrated greens and dehydrated colorful cauliflower, some spice mix, and like dehydrated pasta that was cooked. So basically this, although they were intended to be pour over, almost like instant cup o noodles, they're kind of overfilled. So they fill kind of beyond the jar. So these have to get dumped into a bowl and then water poured on top, but then they rehydrate into beautiful meals. In fact, I have shown in a couple of my videos, like when I was busy, I dumped one of these into a bowl and I always show what it looks like rehydrated. Here's one that was more quinoa based. And here's another couple. And then you can easily basically make yourself tons of instant meals to keep on hand. Imagine if that was put into a Mylar bag instead, and you could shove it into like a bucket as part of your 72-hour kit and basically create your own instant meals for things like backpacking or even like an evacuation type situation. As long as you bring some water with you and you have the means to heat some water, you can have food without having to go through a ton of cooking and fuel usage. So yeah, there's just so many options that you can have for dehydrated foods. These were all the same ingredients, but then just changing the flavor can change it completely from, you know, say a Mexican dish to an Indian dish. So putting in like a fish taco seasoning packet makes it Mexican. Putting in a curry flavored broth cube makes it Indian. So like I said, there's just so many options. You just have to sort of change the spices. So that is definitely a video that I'm going to be working on immediately. I feel like the need is there. So be watching very soon for an instant meal video to be coming out on the channel, and I will kind of walk you through what I do for those. Also, one of the points I want to make, which I have made before too, is that if you dehydrate beans, say chickpeas is a really popular one, and you can even dehydrate them with flavors like salt or like the fish taco seasoning pack, like I was mentioning. And when I say fish taco seasoning pack, it is just the seasoning pack. It is vegan. It's not for fish tacos. Well, it is for fish tacos. I don't use it for fish tacos. You know what I'm saying? But you can flavor the chickpeas however you like and dehydrate them after they've been cooked, and then they turn into little crunchy snacks, and you can just eat them like a snack, or they can get rehydrated into a meal in that way. But just so that you know, because that's another one of the criticisms, is they say that you can't eat dehydrated food without it being rehydrated, and that is not true at all. Actually, even like the veggies that are fully dehydrated, those can just be like a crunchy snack. That was a cauliflower. So you can eat it without dehydrating. Now the pasta might not be quite so pleasant, but there's certain pieces like the beans and things that you can just eat without having to rehydrate. So it is not only for things that you have to rehydrate. So now let's get into kind of the expense. So getting started with dehydrating, if you don't have a dehydrator, getting started is far less expensive than getting started with freeze drying. Now, again, I don't have anything against freeze drying, or I don't know if it's again, that might be the first time I said that. I don't have anything against freeze drying. In fact, I would love to have a freeze dryer to make things like freeze dried tofu and freeze dried, you know, other things that are not quite so easy to dehydrate, and give those items a longer shelf life. Dehydrated or freeze dried tempeh, freeze dried higher fat items, or certain things like bananas that do have kind of a shorter shelf life because of their sugar content when they're dehydrated, even though they still last like a year or two at least. You can get a longer shelf life off of stuff like bananas if you freeze dry them. So I would love to own a freeze dryer, but I do not own a freeze dryer yet, because it was something that we had to really look at and really evaluate for ourselves. Even like it was possible potentially for us to be kind of saving up some money or use a tax return or something. But for us, it came down to, should we drop $3,000 on a machine or should we spend $3,000 on setting ourselves up with more food and more water, outside water storage, things like that? And ultimately for us, the decision was that as cool as a freeze dryer would be, and I could do some great things with it, we wanted to funnel that money into preparing ourselves in other ways. So maybe you're sitting on $3,000 and you're very well stocked and you want to just get a freeze dryer. Go right ahead. And again, I feel like it might make a little bit more sense too if you're an omnivore and you're going to be doing things like meat or eggs or milk, like the stuff that I'm not going to be doing as a vegan. And it might make a little bit more sense for you in that context. Now, like I said, eventually I would like to get a freeze dryer, but for now I'm sticking with dehydrating. And that was one of the huge reasons, was just because of how expensive freeze dryers are. There's also kind of, for me, a bit of a kind of like a, like, I don't know, like with how small the batches are. Cause like the freeze dryer itself is huge, but then the place where you put the food is like this big. You can't really freeze dry very much, like all at the same time. Like with the dehydrator, especially like a 12 tray or 9 tray Excalibur or a 12 tray Nesco stacked dehydrator, you can fit a ton of food on there and get a lot more accomplished in a much shorter period of time. So that's another thing, because for me, I don't usually have a lot of time to spend doing all of these things. And I like to maximize my time by increasing my yields as much as possible. So that's another reason that dehydrating is a great thing for me. So you have to decide, I guess, for yourself what makes more sense as far as the investing of that money up front. And so, yeah, you just have to decide for yourself. But to get started with dehydrating, used dehydrators are usually like 20 bucks. Like if you get yourself like a Nesco on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or whatever equivalent you may have in your country. I know Canada has one, and I'm just totally blanking now. I used to know what the Canadian Craigslist was, but I don't know what that is now. But there's other options in other countries, and whatever you have, people might be getting rid of their dehydrators. It may be a lot cheaper than you think it will be. But even absolutely brand new, top of the line, like the Excalibur 9 tray is $279 or something like that, which is far more accessible than $3,000. You know, even that, it is a big expense up front still, but not even close to the $3,000. So it's just another plus for the dehydrating as far as I'm concerned. If you are hunting a dehydrator though, and you're going to get yourself a used one, just make sure that you find a dehydrator that has a variable temperature control. Don't get one of the ones that just turns on without giving you the option to change the temperature, because usually a dehydrator that runs at a single temperature is running at a very high temperature, and you want the option to dehydrate at lower temperatures to avoid something called case hardening, which is when the outside of the item will dehydrate and form a little shell that's pretty much impenetrable, and then the inside will stay moist, and like you can lose all your food and it will spoil, and it's just a very bad thing. So to avoid case hardening, I actually personally usually dehydrate at a slightly lower temperature than is called for. Not very low. Like if, for instance, the temperature called for that particular item is 135 degrees Fahrenheit, I will dehydrate it instead at 125 degrees Fahrenheit, just to make absolutely sure that I am avoiding the risk of the case hardening. And it's just that easy. And you can dehydrate for as long as you want. I personally would not want a dehydrator that came with a timer, because I wouldn't want it to go off in the middle of my dehydrating. I just let stuff dehydrate and I just sort of periodically check it. There's no such thing really as over dehydrating an item. But yeah, I just kind of make absolutely sure that everything is seriously dry. So most of the time when I run my dehydrator, I'm running it for like at least a day. You don't have to do that, but that's just something that I do, because I'm like, I really want to make sure it's done. Oh, I kind of already mentioned this. Sorry, I have notes because I'm keeping myself on track. It is the whole food plant-based preservation method. I already mentioned that, but seriously, there's all those little rules like no fat, no dairy, no egg, no meats. And so if you're looking for recipes to put into your dehydrator, look up whole food plant-based recipes, oil-free plant-based recipes. And then you like don't even have to think about whether or not it's safe for dehydrating. It will be fine for dehydrating for the most part. If it does have like a bunch of nuts in it or whatever, then you will have to kind of think about, oh, okay, so that'll still last a while. So even still, dehydrated nuts last longer than nuts that are not dehydrated, but not like astronomically longer. So you'll still have something that you could potentially put into a 72-hour kit or whatever for, you know, a year or two without having to think about it too much, but you still will need to be cycling that food in and out and thinking about it a little bit more if you have added nuts or fats to your 72-hour kit. The other thing that I really love about it is that it is very similarly to freeze drying. This is not exclusive to dehydrating. It makes everything lighter and makes it take up less space. So for instance, if you have on your shelf already just like a ton of canned beans. So this is something that I'm getting ready to do for us. I'm getting ready to mash these guys up together, and probably with a little extra water just to make them a little bit more pourable. I'm going to dehydrate these and then sort of break them up or powder them, I haven't decided yet, and turn it into kind of an instant refried bean type thing, which I am planning on putting into our 72-hour kit. So you might say to yourself, why on earth would you do that if they're already canned? Well, it's again the weight, the space that this takes up. So being able to turn this into something that will be much lighter and take up much less space is a giant plus. And also I didn't make this myself. This is a delicious refried bean that I get from Whole Foods. And one of the reasons that I particularly love it for dehydrating is it has, there we go, 0 fat. It's oil-free completely. It is very high in sodium, but it's oil-free and still very strong in flavor, which is partly why I'm going to be mashing up 1 can of another type of bean for each can of the refried bean I have. And this is actually part of what I'm planning for my own personal 72-hour kit. But say, like I said, if you already have a whole bunch of this stuff on hand, you can go ahead and dehydrate and it's not that much of an issue. Obviously, this is better for bugging in, staying in place. You wouldn't want to go through your entire store of canned beans, but like if that's what you have, like you can go ahead and use it, and then you don't even have to think about having to cook something from dry or whatever. So it's just an option. Or like I said, if you're using something that's prepared, that's something that you don't normally make, this is just one of our favorite things in the world, and so I want to have some of that in our kit, sort of a psychological booster. And yeah, it just basically makes things more portable. So that being said, specifically too, that it reduces weight, reduces the space that something takes up. I have a video where I did dehydrated roasted cauliflower, and I took 4 pounds of cauliflower, which takes up quite a lot of space, the frozen cauliflower. And when I had dehydrated it, I roasted it and then I dehydrated it, and it fit into less than a quart jar. Like it drastically reduced in size. That's actually some of the cauliflower I was just crunching right now. It drastically reduces in size. And so you can end up saving yourself a lot of space. Actually, that is one of the things that I do sometimes is my freezer is too full and I want to put something else in it. So I will just pull some of my stash of frozen veggies, roast them, and then dehydrate them. Not only do they save space, they end up becoming something that I can throw into instant meals. So all that being said, I think dehydration, as I've said many times at this point, is still an extremely valid choice. There's very many reasons that we should not be poo-pooing dehydration like it's something that's not desirable. In fact, it's an incredible means of preservation. It is the oldest form of preservation used by humans. It's been in use for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years, for people to preserve food. And it's great. it's like it's worked this far, so you know, it's pretty good. Okay, I almost made it, but she did wake up from her nap before I finished my video. But as I said, it's the oldest form of preservation used by humans. It has kept us alive at many points in history, I'm sure, up until this one, and I believe it will continue to serve us going into the future when we don't have access to fancy things like freeze dryers. We could still use the sun. So yeah, I love dehydrating, and so definitely be looking for more content coming on the channel for the dehydrating specifically. As I said, an instant meal dehydration video, but also I am now working on making our 72-hour kit from all of our home dehydrated foods, as well as a few other things that I don't dehydrate, you know, like oats or whatever. But I'm going to be putting together that bucket and that video very soon. In fact, we're starting tonight. That's why this stuff is out right now. So we're starting on that tonight, and to do it with hopefully as little effort and time spent as possible to help you get started as quickly as possible if that is something that you're interested in. So just keep on the lookout for that. That'll be coming out in the next week or so. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. As always, I hope the rest of your day is good and your life stays wonderful. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna go be with this one. Bye. Do you want to give a smile for the video? Are you cranky about waking up? I know I am sometimes. Did you hear that I was putting together oatmeal for the bucket? And we have some disaster. The real disaster will be that you have to eat oatmeal.